It is.
Woohoo!
We're on. Yay. Test. Okay, so we may not need to use a microphone because it's kind of a small room, but the microphone helps us record, so we're going to use the microphone. Welcome to our very first community conversation. For those of you who are in the back of the room, we set up the room intentionally in these small little circles here, even these chairs, so that we can all talk to each other. But if you don't want to, that's okay. I totally understand. But just so you know, that was the design. So if you'd like at any point in time to jump up, that'd be great. I'm Chris Gavino. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Academics. This is...
Hi.
This is going to be weird. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dr. Carrie Smith. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services.
And we have a couple other folks from our administrative team and teaching team, program team here, and we'll introduce ourselves as it gets to the point where we have some information to share. This night is supposed to be an interactive night, right? We have a presentation, but understand that as you ask questions, we may need to divert a little from our plan. What is the, anyway, I won't get into English quotes. I was going to go best laid plans of mice and men on everyone. Anyway, so what we want to do is just invite you into this conversation tonight about some of our curriculum updates specific to the special ed program team work that took place last year. And for those that don't know what a program team is, we'll get into that a little bit. As well as we have a single program of studies recommendation addition for this year. Just one. Last year we had quite a few. Right? So we'll talk about those tonight. And as we get to updates, so this is what was in the letter that went out. Tonight's conversation will be used to inform and be shared with the PTAC group, the Parent Teacher Advisory Committee of the Board of Education that meets on a almost monthly basis now. I think we miss a month in the January area or December, but on a more regular basis. And these are designed to help inform that conversation because that is a group that has applied to be there, has been selected. We can have only a certain number of people, and we know that we need to expand that conversation. So here is that expansion. We had 25 people say they'd be here tonight, so maybe a few will wander in the next few minutes, which would be great. Here's what we would ask as a conversation set of norms. Please be open-minded and kind. Please, let's respect each other. Let's keep student needs and their success at the forefront of all of our conversations. We want to stay community-focused. Please be present, speak your ideas, and respect the process. And please know that we will have a very specific slide at the beginning of the PTAC meeting that shares out the main feedback from tonight. If not, completely alters the slide deck that we then bring to the PTAC group. Just so that everyone understands what the process is for some of these pieces, we then take that information and we bring it to the Board of Education for a first reading of the program of studies. Then there's some time, and then a second reading and a request for adoption. So that all happens during the month of October and into November. So tonight we have special ed program team, a presentation and discussion. We have one course recommendation, and then if there are other topics, as time allows in the next hour, we would encourage people to ask questions. Kat, you actually brought up a good point. Hope I'm not blocking the camera now with the back of my head. Are there more of these? Yes, there is one about a week or two preceding each PTAC meeting, generally focused on the same topic as will be in the PTAC meeting. So the next one, if you'd like to come, is in October, and it will look at, or we will be talking about generally about secondary instructional bell schedules. Many people in the room may know that at the board level, we presented some information at the end of last year about how we would like to gather more information and look at models for what a block schedule might look like. So that's going to be what we talk about next time. So please come out. All right. Who am I handing this off to?
I'm going to pass the word.
Thank you so much. I don't want to stand at this, so I'll stand over here. I'm Tricia Jerome, and my partner in crime, Karen, and my third partner in crime, Joy, over here. We are all part of the District 86 Parent Network, We are a committee of the PTO here at Central and the boosters at South. We represent both schools, and our job is really to try to be a resource to families who have students with IEPs and 504s. And so we do that by hosting several events throughout the year where we bring in speakers who are experts in topics that are relevant to our families. Do you have anything you want to?
Last year we had, along with the administration, we talked about transitioning into high school and then transitioning post-high school. We had other topics like executive functioning and anxiety. I also wanted to add, we are going to have a social event a week from tomorrow, and I have little flyers for that. If you wanted to grab one, please feel free. We're going to have it on Thursday, the 22nd at Papa Pacero's, which is Cass Avenue in Westmont. And just an opportunity to meet in a smaller group and talk about any topics that might appeal to the community of parents that have students with 504 plans and IEP plans. So yeah, we're kind of a specialized group, but it's an important committee.
So we are looking for additional parent volunteers who would like to join us in our mission and help us with getting our speakers together and presenting these things out to the families. So particularly if you have interest and expertise in social media or technology, we'd love to have you aboard. So please do come out, learn more about what we do and what we have in store this year for your families. I think I'll just set these over here, so as you're leaving, if you'd like to grab one, you're welcome to.
And if anyone wants to click that QR code, that is a direct link to the Facebook page. So, and we will we'll share all this. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to let some of our experts and our team take over. But please, at any point in time, I'll hold this mic, and if you kind of raise your hand, I can bring it over to you if you have a question or something like that, and we can have a back and forth. Sound okay? Any questions before we start? All right. Go ahead, team. Turn on your mic, so.
Dang, I thought I was going to get to use my coaching voice. For those that don't know me, my name is Eric Martzoff. I am the Assistant Principal for Curriculum and Instruction at Hinsdale South. I also have the pleasure of overseeing the Special Education Program Alignment. If you want to scan that QR code there, that'll pull up a document of some key terms that you will hear throughout the presentation as well, and then if you continue on through. When you hear terms like Haven or BASIS or KPI or PREP, those are all acronyms, right? And what all that is listed out of what that would stand for in there. So if you want to take a moment to do that, we're happy to do that.
I'll leave it up.
Oh, you're going to leave it up?
Yeah,
Okay.
just, we've got a few that are QR coding.
Can you do this at board meetings too, Chris?
There are a lot of acronyms, aren't there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so as I said, I have the pleasure of overseeing this. Those are, of course, our team members, several of which we have in the audience tonight that will be presenting with us. We have our Directors of Special Education, Ms. Kristen Marks-Paskevich and Andrea Ellerton. We have Katie Havertape with us. We have Jim Madonia, Mary Medina, and Sasha Bohing with us.
Can we let them identify themselves?
I figured they would do that when they were presenting.
Oh, okay. So these wonderful people over here. Yeah.
I figured we were going to come up and give them the microphone and they were going to get in front.
All right. Sounds good.
Sound good? Okay. And then you can see that we have a nice representation of the buildings and all different aspects of what would encompass special education. With our course teams, we had representation from our Haven program, from our program success, from our self-contained, from our co-talks. We had a little smattering of everything as we went through those. Next slide. In case you haven't seen this yet, program alignment, This is our lovely pyramid, and it kind of breaks out how we break it down when we're doing this. It is, on the bottom, kind of the overarching, or the support, if you will. I shouldn't say overarching because it's on the bottom, right? It's the support and the basis of everything that we're doing. That's our District 86 strategic plan that had the community involvement, board members, administrators, department chairs, teachers, consultants, as I mentioned, community members. And they laid out that 5-year strategic plan that you hear referenced quite often at our board meetings. From there, when we did the curriculum alignment, one of the goals was aligning the curriculum. In order to do that, we created our District 86 program teams. That's our first phase, right? As it says there, phase 1. That's our first phase as we go through it. And that's kind of the overarching, the big, if you're thinking of it in terms of a viewpoint, it's our 30,000-foot view, right? Like, what does the whole program look like as it goes? And as we narrow down, as we move into the development team, that kind of narrows the scope a little bit. And then as you get into the writing team, that narrows it even more as we're writing the curriculum. So this program team, that's what we're presenting tonight, and that's what we were all members of. And that was an overview of everything that we want our special education program to be in District 86. So we kind of took the best of what we offer at Central and the best of what we offer at South and made the whole district program team even better. And from that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen.
I'm Kristen Marks. I'm the Director of Special Education at Hinsdale South. And what we wanted to look at and show you guys is kind of the process that we used this past school year. Eric and Chris have been super helpful guiding us through this SPED program team, and I really appreciate you guys helping with that. If you look on the right-hand side where it says program teamwork, this is the phase 1 that Eric was just referring to, and this is kind of the process. So we went through this process, and as you can see on the left-hand side, it kind of goes through the months and all of our meetings that we met. So during our first meeting in December, we looked at the purpose of this program team, what our objectives were. We talked about our mission, and we talked about SWOT, which we identified strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And during that time, we really got to kind of dive deep into what our special education services look like. And we also really got to say what we wanted them to look like. So we had a really nice conversation of figuring out, what it looks like and kind of what we would want this to look like as a whole. So then in January, we drafted a mission statement, and then we ended up, getting some feedback from our departments, redrafting it, kind of getting into a final mission statement. And then in February, we drafted goals based on the strategic plan. So we actually picked 3 goals, and those goals look like alignment and measures of success, career and life readiness, and SEL skills. And we felt these 3 were the most important for looking at students' IEPs and really focusing on students, making their goals and also their post-secondary endeavors after high school and post-transition planning. So then after we kind of identified our goals, we also drafted some KPIs, which are key performance indicators, and those will help us identify making progress on our goals that we had identified. We also did a lot of research. We visited peer districts, so all of us took a district or 2, either went to visit or called them and just asked, hey, what do you do for this type of programming? What do you use for this type of curriculum? Some of the schools that we visited were the Glenbards, Glenbrooks, Napervilles, Willowbrook, Addison, Lockport, Lyons, Lamont, Leiden, Stevenson, and New Trier. And so we just wanted to get a big scope and sequence of how other schools have their continuum of services. So after we kind of gathered that information, then we looked at our continuum of services. We filled in what we felt maybe we could adjust or make better, and we defined functions of our programs. So at that time, we also, as you guys know, special education kind of goes into every single department. So we have classes that are, English, we have math classes, we have social studies, we have science. So we did connect with the English and math DCs to help us. They're a little bit further along in the program teamwork and the curriculum alignment. So we kind of used some of their guidance to help us. And then in May, we revised those functions to kind of get them to a final draft because we thought it was really important to present this to our departments before the end of the school year. So in the middle of May, we did present all of our information that we kind of drafted together to our departments, and then we used some of their feedback. and we administered surveys just to get not just our program team's information, but our whole department. And we used the department feedback to finalize the planning, and then we developed SPED course teams. So that's kind of the work that we did from December until June. And then moving forward, we're going to be looking at developing our development teams. So the next one is our mission statement. So like I talked about before, our program team created a draft. We sent it out to our departments. We took some feedback. Then we revised the mission statement, sent it to our departments again, and then revised it for this final draft of where we came from. So I'll let you guys kind of read through that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just so I understand. With regards to the special ed department, oh, thanks, Chris. With regards to the, I don't even think it's working anyhow. With regards to the special ed department and how we're speaking currently of students 9th through 12th grade, correct? So how does the department differentiate between children that could have an IEP or a 504 but are in general programming and a student that has to be in specifically special ed programming? And how does the special ed mission or goals, how do you work with the general course faculty to make sure that they still match? Because it's going to be different, yeah?
I'll be able to answer the second question in terms of how we worked collaboratively with the gen ed departments, but specifically in terms of how we determine if a student is eligible for a 504 or an IEP. That goes through the multi-tiers of systems and supports process, and that's something that we've really been working on a lot here within the district with Dr. Payne and Dr. Covino, Dr. Smith. So that's part of the process that we're also engaging in through our planning, our strategic plan, ensuring that those students have a tiered level of system support that do not have a 504 or an IEP.
So I guess I'm misunderstanding then the slides, because I'm interpreting the slides to me that special education has different, you could have different curriculum by subject matter. So do you understand what I'm
How do you
I
determine
think-
who's in the special curriculum versus in a general classroom?
Okay, yes, there might be. If I could ask, and this is with all due respect,
Yeah,
maybe give it 5 more minutes, because I
Okay.
think we're gonna answer a few of those
Okay.
questions that you're asking right now
Okay.
in a more specific way.
Okay.
And if we don't, I'll come back.
okay, thank you.
We should have a board so we can write our questions down.
Parking lot?
Yeah.
I can
Or-
write it.
There is a board. Yeah, there you go.
I was looking for markers, I don't see them though.
Nice to see you. Just a quick question, and maybe you're gonna get to this. How big will the development team be, and what is the focus? Because you said that was like the next step.
Next step.
So I didn't know if you weren't ready to address it, or if it's further.
It is not further in because we've just identified development teams. So every course will have a development team. So if we wanted to say our English class will have a development team from people from Central and from South who currently teach that. And then typically those teachers also teach a co-taught section of it.
Yep.
So that will be that development team to be able to then develop the curriculum.
I see. And so one of the things I think, Chris, I mentioned this to you last year. So there's a lot of, as you know, nuances in how you teach a special ed student. And because every IEP is literally individualized, that could be, run the gamut. When we talk about interventionists, and we're bringing some of them on, because I think that's probably a cost-effective idea among another group of reasons. One of the things I noticed with having someone who, was a student who really loved her teachers, and so I got to know all the teachers because of that, was just the nuances that they would teach with. And how are we going to help our interventionists learn all of those tricks of the trade so that they can make a smooth transition and really, impart their knowledge to these students? Because it's a specialty area. And so I've always been concerned when we said that we were going to have regular, general, teachers teach a special ed group. So I would love to know a little bit more about that piece.
So when you're talking about our interventionists, are you talking about in the core departments as an interventionist?
We might have terms crossed here. So an interventionist is a general education teacher, for the most part,
Okay.
who may be called upon for either just-in-time support for a class, right? Any class, right, in their content area, or pushes in sometimes to programs like Excel or others so that they can provide content area support for students we've already identified as needing support. Are you maybe asking more about the relationship between the general ed teacher and the special education teacher in the co-teaching setting?
Not in the co-teaching setting,
Okay.
and that if it was, it'd be more comfortable. It's more in the random push-in where you're sending an interventionist versus a regular co-taught situation. And so I'm just curious, like, you know, because special ed teachers get to know their students on a deeper level, in my opinion, than maybe a regular teacher who also goes deep, but because of those nuances that are in the plan, et cetera. And so how do we transfer that knowledge to someone who's an interventionist who may come up with a situation that they hadn't before? And what are we doing in training in that perspective? To me, that's really critical because these students could be acting like A one day and B the next. And so how do we help those teachers that are pushing in as an interventionist if they don't have the specialty training that the other teachers have been through?
I could speak a little bit about that as to what we've been doing here at Central. So many times if we see that a student requires additional intervention support, we ask and we support our students within program success as well as strategies to fill out that request for that interventionist support. Another thing that we do is we try to set up that interventionist support during those strategies and program success classes. That way the case manager, who is most likely that strategies or program success teacher, is having those conversations as well as sharing the IEP summary, different strategies to utilize, and it's done during that class period. So that's one way that our teams are collaborating with the interventionist to help support.
And it's typically one-on-one at that
Okay,
time.
okay.
Because, you know, they'll identify, I need help in this specific subject. And in our strategies classes, there's maybe, you know, the students in there are it's so individual what they need and what they're working on. They can set up times to meet with the interventionist individually.
And one nice thing about that is also, since we do have like a Google form for the student to reach out, it's also assisting that student with executive functioning skills to take that initiative and help them go through that process.
Which, if they have that, they may not fill out a form to reach out. So,
And so the teacher in there can help them.
Right.
You know, let's identify, you're struggling in this class. Let's go ahead and here are your resources. Let's do this. And
right. So, yeah, I don't want to leave it up to just the student to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have the interventionists been trained in multisensory teaching techniques?
I could not answer that question in terms of their training.
Likely not.
Right.
No,
So I think
no.
it would be incredible for you guys to do a visual math program with whoever your math interventionist is, because I have a kid who struggled, and definitely a visual math program is something that's lacking in our building. A lot of our kids that are missing number sense just are missing it because we teach auditory sequential. We don't get into the nitty-gritty. Multisensory is absolutely the key to helping kids with mathematics that struggle.
And I just want to reiterate just real quickly, most of the work of our interventionists is work with the general education population.
Right.
Right, and most of the work with our special education students falls onto the co-teachers and or the case managers and or the program success teachers and or in the classes that they're in.
We get
Right.
sent to the math interventionist, I don't know if you realize that. So I have a kid who everyone I know who's got a kid who's struggling in math, who's in resource, they get sent to the interventionist. And so it's important that they know how to help our kids.
And we have at least 7 math interventionists at Central, I think that's right, and the same number at South, right? But again, generally speaking, we are looking at interventionists working with the population that is the non-special education population, because we have a relatively robust staff that is also working in the special education setting. But
even kids without special ed needs need
Absolutely.
visual math programs,
yeah,
so.
well,
Kim, I noted
yeah.
Thank
all
you,
of
I
these
saw it.
questions.
we wrote it down.
How many IEPs are you guys writing freshman year? Because we were told to have my daughter drop her IEP because otherwise she wouldn't be able to have electives. And then we were scrambling to get an IEP put back in place. Do you have a lot of IEPs written freshman year? Or are people coming in with their IEPs?
Yeah,
I think it depends on the year.
Are you talking initial IEPs?
Yes.
Oh, for freshmen, I don't know that data off the top of my head. I know we collected initial IEPs in terms of all 4 years last school year.
I just want to go back to our norms real quick.
Yeah.
Let's stay community and larger group focused.
Yeah.
Right? And we can absolutely answer those questions one-on-one. Please send them to us.
So one last question related to kind of the plan going forward. When we're utilizing our early release Wednesdays, are you going to have the opportunity to not showcase, but discuss scenarios, just again, because, you know, an IEP is so individualized, you know, and just talk about the different situations and one of the ways that you can maybe help this student versus that one. And the only reason why I would even think to say that is when my daughter was here, I worked so closely with our case manager, and so, you know, to this day, you know, I just still send her a note every now and then, just, you know, bowing down to her. But we work together as a team, and she will say right back to me that part of her success was because I had so much trust in her, and then we brought my daughter into that situation, and we created a carrot of sorts where she wanted to get out a reading resource because she didn't feel she should be in there, but she wasn't quite doing the work to get the grade. So she went from, this was years ago now, but from a C to an A in a matter of 6 weeks. And so she got out of there, was finally able to take an elective. But I don't know that a lot of students and parents know that you can actually, you know, jump out that quickly. It's not going to happen for everyone. But it was only because I worked with my case manager so closely at that time. And so I don't know if you, when you are meeting together on your early release Wednesdays, if you talk about, you know, here's an idea or sharing of ideas.
So I think that will probably be in some of this work, because we have a development team and then we have a writing team.
Okay.
So that'll be a time where they can then write the curriculum and look at what types of activities would be the best for that type, you know, our types of learners, and figure out, you know, specifically how to target some of those skills that some of our students might be lacking.
And while the formal name is curriculum alignment, instructional practices, specifically those that have been very successful, are always part of the sort of final conversations.
Okay.
And I can address that on the next slide as well.
We haven't done this one yet, though. This
I know.
is a biggie.
Yep, this
Do all
one's me.
students with IEPs and 504s have a case manager? Or
Yes.
is it just IEP?
So students with an IEP have a case manager, and then students with a 504, they have a coordinator.
Okay.
And the case manager for a 504 is the guidance counselor.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna go through this slide. So what we're looking at here is the program team recommendations. So when you look at the left, those are the must maintains at D86. So these are things that we already currently do and that we continue to want to do and have in our practice. So we want to ensure that IEP teams make coursework determination. So just to give you a little background there, IEP teams, that's everybody that supports your child with an IEP. So that would be the case manager, any related service providers, the LEA, and parents included. So those determinations are made at IEP meetings, and this is to ensure that not one person is dictating or making all of those decisions. So coursework determinations are determined by the team. Another thing that we're going to continue to do is continue to ensure that all students have the LRE, the least restrictive environment. This ensures that students are put in classroom settings that are appropriate for them academically, but also the importance of having that social piece so that they're included within their least restrictive setting with their same age peers as much as they possibly can be. We want to ensure and continue to ensure students' voice and ideal future goals are at the center of our coursework determination. And so that's kind of something all students, when they turn 14 and a half, that's something where we build in that transition plan. And if you haven't done that yet, you haven't been a part of it, it's something really exciting that we begin to develop as students enter into the high school setting. Most students have this within their 8th grade transition meeting, and that's where we really start to target what students want to do after high school, after they graduate. Another important thing to point out is student voice. This is also tied to our Goal 2 Strategy 5 work that we're doing, because we want to ensure student voice is included in the development of our curriculum, our processes, and all things within D86. Another thing we'll continue to do is ensure that the co-teaching models are used to support students with IEPs in the general education classrooms. So this is something that we have ensured and we continue to ensure. I know this year in particular, Dr. Smith as well as Kristen and I were creating walkthrough schedules to just really take some data and see the different type of co-teaching models that are being used, the frequency, and providing more feedback to our teachers, our co-teaching teams. And we'll also continue to have professional development for those new co-teaching pairs. And then finally, maintaining support courses for students with IEPs. So we're going to continue to provide all the supports within the courses that we have for our students, and you'll see that through our continuum of services. Before I go to the right side, see we have a few questions, so.
You're not limiting kids to classes that have co-teachers, because I know that came up with my child, but like if there isn't a co-teacher, you're fine with kids with IEPs not having co-teachers, correct?
It's all based on what the individual student needs. So any decision that's made at that IEP team, that meeting, it's all based on that individual student. So if the student requires, is in an AP class, we aren't going to say that they need a co-teacher because they have an IEP. It's going to be based on what that student is performing at academically and the supports that they need. And those can be done through the IEP accommodations.
So, thank you. So you mentioned 14 and a half, so if an 8th grader has an IEP at their feeder school, are they reanalyzed or reassessed? I'm not sure the right word to reevaluated, thank you, to determine if the IEP should continue here, or who does?
So every 3 years, a student is up for a reevaluation in which the team will go through all the different domains areas to see if the student's still eligible for an IEP. When a student turns 14 and a half, then that student, the team develops this transition plan that I was speaking of, and we do different assessments, and there are different types of assessments than the 3-year reevaluation type of assessments. These assessments include student interviews, parent interviews, different career type interviews to really try to identify what the student wants to do, what they're good at. And then we develop goals in that transition area to target education, employment, it could be vocational or trade, and independent living skills. And so we write goals for those areas to ensure that we're really targeting those post-secondary needs for our students.
Okay.
So
And then
I want to tag on to that too. So just so you know, before, and you might know this already, but before students come over to us as freshmen, we do have a transition meeting where we're going and we're talking about, this is what we have here at the high school, what are the students' needs, how can we support that when they get to high school. So there's also a step kind of before they get to us, we're in communication with the feeder district. So I just wanted to just add that little piece.
Okay, so there's that communication. One of the concerns I had as a parent is in the presentation by Dr. Payne, it seemed that some of these decisions were going to be made not perhaps on an individualized student basis, but on a percentage representation, and that alarmed me.
So this students' IEP decisions, those are made by what Ms. Alexson talked about with our IEP team. And those are the people that she talked about in terms of case manager, gen ed teacher, parent, related services staff. So those are the people who comprise the IEP team and make those IEP team decisions. So we base our decisions on what the students need.
So, sorry. With regards to the 14.5-year benchmark, that's typically roughly like mid-freshman year or something like that. So you have some data, academic data, to see how the child is doing before you have the meeting. But the 14.5-year-old meeting is really kind of long-term planning for the student, right? So taking the conversation outside of special ed kids, at 14.5, most general education kids have no clue. Like, my kid is a senior, you know, it varies day by day. But more than that, something that you said, in terms of the meeting and the planning, you take a look at like academic path, like the pathway to acceleration or success, right? I have concern that at that meeting, the child could potentially be placed on a path that would not support all of the success that they could have if not on that path. Meaning, at 14.5, it's, you know, they could be identified for transition services, right?
So at 14.5, that's the initial point in which the transition plan is introduced and added to the IEP. But if you think about how many years we have from 14.5 until graduation, that transition plan is done annually at the annual review. So all of those assessments, all of those surveys, everything is updated every year. And so that way we can truly individualize, but also that's why it's so important. And I think that's one of the best things about this community is the parent involvement at these IEPs, because you guys are there with your students, you're there with your kids, you're talking through these things. So all of that's being noted, and then the team's there to help support, to find that goal and to get them there.
And I think too, I just wanted to kind of, what I heard you say is that you want to make sure that we're challenging, continuing to challenge our students. I think that we all agree to that. We want our students to move, we want them to achieve their goals, and we want them to move on paths where they don't need the accommodations and the supports that. And so that's always our end goal, is to challenge them and to help them continue so that they can be independent as we, as they move on through post-secondary.
Can you real quick just state if there's anything that about what you just said that also applies to 504s, or is it all 504s are a completely different beast and none of this applies to 504s?
Transition, or 504s don't have transition plans.
Okay, so they just have an annual meeting with their coordinator, and then it's just sort of like, what accommodations are you getting, and do you still need them next year?
So, yeah, the biggest difference, so are you talking about 8th grade to high school or just in general?
Well, 8th grade to high school, but then thereafter
Okay.
within high school?
Sure. So we do have a Director of Student Services, Dr. Jason Rayfeld, and he attends all the 504 meetings at the middle school level for the students transitioning over, so we can ensure their success and we can ensure that any accommodations and supports that are required for those students with 504s are identified and in place for when school begins. In terms of the transition plan, like Kristen said, there's no transition plan with the 504 plan. And the difference between the 504 and the IEP is that the IEP, it's put in place because it's impacting their education.
So the easiest way I can explain the difference between a 504 and an IEP, you have to have a disability for both, except for an IEP, you're going to have specialized instruction through that special education teacher or related services and goals. So you both have accommodations. It's just you have to, for that IEP, there has to be an impact in the education and then need that specialized instruction.
So it sounds like some of the questions that we're receiving, I think that parent network meeting, that first meeting, you kind of go into kind of what IEPs and 504s and some of those things are. So I don't want to steal your thunder, but I think that some of those questions that are being asked are probably more appropriate for that session, which I don't think we've scheduled yet. I know we didn't kind of chat about dates for that. So I do think, we kind of wanted to focus on the program of study piece this evening, but please know that that is one of like the very first parent network topics is kind of on IEPs and understanding IEPs and 504s and things like that, so.
Dr. Smith, I'd like to go back to what you were saying just prior, when you're talking about, and rightfully so, if the kid can be challenged and work past, as my daughter did with her reading resource, and we want to grow them out of that. But at the same point, now that she's in college, I would have been at a loss had she lost her IEP prior to college, because that information transfers over to a 504 for college if necessary. So how much do you take that into account, or does it depend, again, on every student? Because we don't want to lose services that can help them attain the services in college. And it's similar to when you meet with the students in 8th grade because you want to transition properly. You know, we still, whether it's to college or to our transition center or wherever, we want to position them. So while my own student benefited from getting out of a reading resource, how also are we looking at, how much do we not pull back so that they can have this for their go forward in college?
So, and again, I know we want to kind of keep this kind of more global, but, you know, to just in general answer your question, again, it goes back to that individualized, that IEP team decision. And so we're looking at certain things as whether or not a student is making progress toward their goals, how are they doing in those classes. We get our general education teacher report. So there are ways that we're looking to gather that information to determine how a student is doing. So that would be an IEP team discussion.
And it only happens every 3 years. So every 3 years is when you could potentially look at a student not qualifying for services anymore. It's not something that you look at every single year. And
right.
You know,
in general, we do want to look. We do look at the goals, right?
Yes.
And we also are looking like if a student is making great progress with their goals, or if a student, if we have a concern about a student who's not meeting their goals, we also want to have those questions. So it doesn't, you know, we want to make sure that we're addressing those as those things arise. So I know that we had some questions, but.
You
No,
mentioned
yeah.
you went to other districts and looked at what they're doing. We've switched to a 2-tier system outside of special ed. Most of the districts you looked at have 3, some even have 4 tiers outside of special ed. What did you like about the schools that you visited and talked to?
So when you're saying tiers, do you mean like MTSS tiers?
She means courses that
Course.
are designed to be like an honors and
G,
Oh.
regular,
accelerated.
honors.
Yeah.
Okay. I think the one thing that I liked about listening to other districts were, you know, you've only been where you've been, you know, in different places. So it was nice to hear, oh, you know, they have some classes that, oh, I haven't thought about running it maybe that way. A lot of them asked us about our programming too. Like, they're like, oh, I've always wanted to know this. They wanted to know a lot about our Haven program. You know, how does that work? I think, you know, some of the bigger things was just, what type of curriculum do you use? Because there's not a plethora of curriculums for some of our students. So it was nice to hear, oh, you're using that curriculum, so are we. Or, oh, you use this, we use this. We probably need to look into some different curriculums. I thought that was a nice takeaway from the people I talked to.
I think one of the takeaways I received in the few schools that I spoke to is that our continuum of service that we offer our students here, we offer a full wide range of continuum of services that many districts don't do. And then this was even before we brought in the BASIS program, so now we're covering a whole another population in terms of academic, social, emotional needs. So if anything, a lot of the people were wanting to come here and see what we did.
We are a destination district for these types of services.
Yes.
I mean, and that's why I came here. So, do you want
Well,
to?
just 2 quick comments I want to make because my daughter is actually a senior and she's been through, you know, that many years of being 504 plan. I feel we always say put focuses on accommodations, but for students, like my daughter in 504 plan, that's in the normal academic program, a lot of caveats that advice that she has received is not actually just accommodation. It's more specific, individualized suggestions from her program manager or counselor, such as students actually only are required to take 2 years of language. So if language is not her specialty, maybe we should advise students to avoid that. So my feeling is if we have counselors that are helping students in the 504 plan, that kind of specialized knowledge, it could be a common knowledge that we can share with the counselors, and then they can in turn help the students this way. It's just not accommodations, but it's special advice and suggestions for their regular academic program. The other thing I feel throughout the years is even though we only meet once a year, it's kind of hard in that single meeting to express all our issues and problems, because problems show up throughout the year. In the academic year, issues here or there, it doesn't all pop up and we're not very clear in that one single meeting that address all the issues the student have. So I hope there's a common channel that the student parent can go throughout the year if there's any special needs and questions and issues that arise, that we have that go-to person and an open channel for that.
Sure, I think that's one of the biggest benefits, especially in a district like this, is just those multidisciplinary teams that we have for students, whether that be Gen Ed, 504, IEPs, and just the level of communication and collaboration that takes place with these teams. I know I could speak more towards the special ed, but I do know that there's the general ed student support teams, the 504 teams, they collaborate. And for parents more in particular, that's what the guidance counselor, if you have a 504, would be your point of contact to reach out. And same thing with the case manager for an IEP, that's your go-to person for when those events do come up. Because like you said, you aren't gonna have all these problems arise a week before your annual review, or so that's definitely why we have those people there to support.
There is a problem that arose for my daughter when she was a sophomore. We realized 4 years ago that you mentioned something, that counselor relationship. Someone just yesterday asked for some advice because their daughter is a junior and is in Algebra 1 Part 2, or I'm trying to go back. Anyway, the point is this child will need to take geometry over the summer in order to get to Algebra 2 trig by senior year in order to go on to many colleges. We found that out through just looking at colleges online and finding out what those individual requirements are. The counselors don't have that kind of knowledge for IEP students that, as of sophomore year, there maybe wasn't a discussion about college, but now there is. And oh my gosh, we didn't prepare them from a math perspective. And when my daughter went through this, I was not told once. We found it out on our own. I did alert the district to what was going on, the school and the district. And I have even written a letter saying that I believe we need to have a counselor that can relate specifically to IEPs, more so even than 504s, but IEPs. Because I do think that there are big things missed, and it maybe isn't anyone's fault, but maybe we need to have a specialty.
So I could address that real quick, and then I'm going to move on to the right side of this slide. So for that in particular, I'm actually going to address it in the next slide, because that is a conversation that we had through our program team meeting, just in terms of that sequence of courses, and to ensure students are ready for the ACT, the SAT, and those testing, especially if they're college bound. So it's definitely something we're talking about. It's definitely something we're talking about at those transition meetings as well. Also, we're having a conversation at transition meetings in terms of, what courses will you be our NCAA, eligible, things of that sort.
Okay.
So we are taking a lot of the parent feedback that we're receiving. We're bringing it to this table, and we're also having those conversations at the middle school IEP meetings and the annual reviews. But I definitely hear what you're saying in terms of the counselors, but it's something that we talk about within the special education department, because we do have a lot of parents asking us those questions. And also in the next slide, you'll see as we went through this work with the general education, different departments, things like those were taken into consideration when we moved in the direction that we did with the sequence of classes in general education as well as special education.
Yeah, I had a similar call this week from another family whose kid will finish senior year, who have only taken algebra, and the state requires you to finish geometry, I believe, but now we're counting algebraic, whatever the pre-class to all the algebras. Why is that counting as geometry, and how does that prepare a student who is college bound? Because I mean, this kid now needs 2 additional years of math before he could go to college, and like that's terrifying to me that you could get to your senior year and not be prepared mathematically.
Yeah, so again, that really speaks to the work that the math department has done within their program curriculum alignment, as well as the work that we're mirroring those gen ed departments to ensure that our students are college and career ready. So I'm gonna go over the points on the right side now. So as I mentioned, everything to the left are the must maintains, the great things that we do here and that we're gonna continue to do here. So through the program teamwork that we've done in the past year, we've been able to align courses in what we want to call prep. It was previously called Applied at South and ES at Central. So we didn't want to take one name over the other. So we created something, we spent a lot of time having these conversations, and so both departments determined that prep, and that's post-secondary readiness educational pathways. So that is our acronym for what we would call our instructional classes. So through this program alignment work, we have created that sequence for the prep courses. One particular thing I think that we'll get through later is ensuring that those prep courses are offered in both buildings, so all students have the same opportunities in both schools. Utilization of common assessment data. So this is extremely important as we go through this whole process and utilizing common assessment data, because with IEPs, we're data-driven people. We utilize that data as baseline data to see where students are starting at and where they're coming through and ending at the end of the year, midpoint at those IEP progress meetings. So this data, the common assessment data, is extremely important to us because not only does it help us track the students' progress, but it's going to help us make the best decisions we can possibly make when it comes to that student's classroom recommendations from the IEP team. We also aligned and expanded the math course sequence with general education. So this goes to many of the questions that you guys just posed in terms of some of the parents that are coming to you. They're saying that their students only in Algebra 1 Part 2 this year as a junior. So through the alignment that the math department has done and us collaborating and doing our alignment and basically it's parallel to theirs, this is gonna ensure that our students as well as the general education students aren't coming up with, being short in terms of courses that they're gonna need if they're college bound. We also aligned and expanded our foundation course options. So more specifically, we've created more elective classes for foundations. So we're gonna have more foundation students within general education classes with those general ed teachers with peer buddies for foundations of cooking, art, and math. We also did alignment and special education classes, offerings, program success, and strategies. So prior to this past year, we both offered program success, but it may not have looked quite the same. We may not have used the same curriculums. Same thing with strategies. So strategies was a new name that we came up with. Previously at Central, I think we had 3 different names for our resource classes. We had study skills, learning strategies, and academic center. And coming in new 3 years ago, I mean, it took me a good month to understand the difference just between those 3 resources. So one thing that's really nice is in partnership and through this process, we've come up with the strategies, and in terms of scheduling, It's strategies 9, 10, and 11, 12 to ensure that students are closer to their same age peers within these classes, whereas before we could have had, you know, freshmen with older age upperclassmen.
Freshman year is really important. I mean, I wouldn't even group them with 10, I don't think. I mean, both of my kids went through the whole sequence, and it was, that's when you need those weekly lessons that they go through. I mean, are they gonna have to repeat them then 10?
So it's really, we focus our strategies and our program success looks a little different, but the strategies focuses more on the executive functioning, the time management, going into Canvas, looking at what their grades are, what's missing, things of that sort, and then embedding more individualized lesson for that student's specific needs, but also you had probably the same case manager and strategies teacher doing many of the same things, and what she did where within her classroom on her board, she would identify some of the same things for the students that happened to be in those same classes, so they were aware of and they could keep track of upcoming tests and assignments, things like that.
They did study groups, they worked on how you write note sets. I mean, I think it's really important for it to be a 9th grade class, because by 11, 12, 10, 11, 12, they could be all together, but freshmen really need the individual instruction because they truly, it's their first real independence, because usually they've been managed up until they get to this door.
Andrea, to your point, they were very different, and I found them disappointing, frankly. My daughter found them fun.
Okay.
But to Kim's point, I felt like they could have utilized that time better. I did contribute to Donut Day, but, and which I think is also important.
And popcorn day?
But no, I would like to see it a little bit more honed in. I think they're important to have, but maybe a more specific plan.
And I will say that's one thing, just in terms of COVID and all the changes that we had to pivot to. And so through this curriculum alignment, this program team, we are definitely engaging in conversations as to, you know, is it pass fail, is it grades, what really is coming out of this, because you're receiving a credit, we're teaching executive functioning skills. So yes, we're definitely narrowing it down, Gloria.
I think that's great,
to be more
really
structured.
important, really important.
So our kids coming now from 181 have already had the executive functioning, the RUSH program, which I think is exactly what you guys are doing. So, I mean, that's something that you guys need to be aware of because it's repetition. So we were really lucky because our case manager realized that it was, I think, all the kids in the same group, they'd already had it. And so theirs was completely different. They gave speeches to each other, they brainstormed with each other. I mean, it was the most dynamic class probably in the building, freshman. And it was learning strategies back freshman year.
Yeah. Oh, one more bullet point I didn't get to on the previous slide, thank you. And that is our alignment in our continuum of services. And so I will say, I've been here for 3 years and it's probably, this is one of the things I'm probably the most proud of as a director within this district is the continuum of services that we provide within the district. And I know I had mentioned this earlier, but, and Lori, you had said this is a destination district, and the level of supports that we provide our students that have special needs and IEPs is phenomenal. And through this process, we are ensuring that those programs are in alignment, whether it be co-taught to now basis. It's definitely through this process and this program and our collaboration with our administration as well as the other DCs that we're ensuring true alignment, not just special ed, but with that gen ed too, which brings me into the next slide.
So before we move on, let me just note that we are now at 8 o'clock. So we're not going to end, but this is the time we said we were going to end. Out of, I think, respect to the teachers who are here who are going to present part of the next few slides, I would like to ask if it's okay if we hold questions as we finish this section of the presentation, let them participate in, you know, they got to be up early and with all of your and the community's children tomorrow morning. If that's okay, I'd like to do that.
Okay, so this kind of goes to a lot of the questions that were coming up before. So as we had mentioned, we're working collaboratively with the general education curriculum alignment team. So the special ed program team has been in alignment with the general education instructional practices, so providing challenging, supportive, grade level academic experiences for all learners. The teachers and support staff are included in these discussions, the decision making and planning that all the gen ed teachers engage in. And so I think that's one of the biggest strengths to this curriculum alignment and the collaboration to ensure that our co-teachers, our prep teachers, one of the biggest benefits is as a special education teacher, I'm an LBS 1 special ed teacher. I was not trained in every single content area. So allowing our teachers, our special ed teachers, our co-teachers and those prep class teachers to be engaged and developing the curriculum alongside of our gen ed teachers is not only ensuring that our special ed voices are being heard, those strategies are being shared with the gen ed teachers and interventionists, but also to ensure that we're increasing our content knowledge for when we're delivering instruction, especially in those more instructional self-contained classes. So some ways that we looked at that we've already been doing this is we had course development writing teams in math for the algebra 21-22 school year, as well as geometry. We had writing teams in English for those new junior and senior options, and English 1. And then we also had writing teams in science for the physics and chemistry and biology. And then writing teams in social studies for world cultures. So as you can see, all core content areas, we've had special ed teachers pushing in, and not necessarily pushing in, actually being true team members in the creation of the gen ed curriculum. And as I said before, that's benefiting all populations, gen ed, special ed. Just some things to highlight here with the things that we've been doing. We also took some baseline data. So when we look at just these curriculum alignment changes that the general education departments have made in terms of course placement, we're also mirroring that as well. So we have taken some baseline data so we can see how many students are included within co-taught classes, and collectively with the gen ed departments, we're going to track that data to see if we can improve including students in their least restrictive setting, those co-taught classes. Did the numbers of students with IEPs from a prep program to co-taught increase? So those are some of the ways that we want to collect data to show the marked difference that we're making through this work.
Great. I'm going to stand just because I don't want to be speaking with my back towards you guys. So I'm Sasha Bohum. I'm one of the speech language pathologists in the district. I'm specifically at Central. So I know we've been talking a lot about continuum of services, and I know many of you might be visual learners. So if you are, we have a nice visual up there on the left-hand side. And so this goes visually, this is a visual representation of our continuum of services. So at the top there, it talks about our general education courses, which include AP and honors level courses. So students with IEPs may be enrolled in these classes. They still have a case manager, their IEP, access to their accommodations. Maybe they have a resource, maybe they don't. Our next level in the continuum, so it's our first level of kind of more support. So regular general education classes, so same curriculum as everybody else. There might be a co-teacher that's in some of the core content area classes. So math, English, science, EFACS, and those types of classes. Again, they have their own case manager. They may or may not have a resource period, access to their accommodations, and those types of things. The next more supported level, this is our prep sequence. So this is kind of what this is what Andrea was talking about earlier. And I think she was very kind. We had to battle it out for names when all 20 of us met together. But ultimately we came out with prep. So as she had mentioned before, at South it was called, or it is called Applied right now, and at ours it's ES, or Educational Services. So some of you might be familiar with the term self-contained, but really it's taught by a special education teacher, and they have modified curriculum. Speaking specifically at Central currently, Our ES classes mirror the general ed curriculum, but we might not go into as much depth as some of the general ed courses. Again, case manager, access to their accommodations, modifications within the classroom. And then we have our most supported group at the bottom there, so our foundations program, working on life skills. That's where you will see more of the related services integrated into the classroom, into the programs. So that's it.
Can I ask one quick question? Did the prep replace GAR? Do we see a lot of those kids that were in general, which we shouldn't use the word general ever because that was the next level down below regular. I have a lot of those kids that would have been in a G and AR class moved into the prep classes.
I think it depends on student.
So we had those, we called them AR classes at South.
Yep.
And we don't have those anymore, probably maybe 6 years.
6 years.
I would say for us, most of those students went into the general education classes, not into the applied classes.
Okay. And how are they supported?
Through their co-teaching and accommodations.
And sometimes a
And
paired class.
interventionists.
So I
Right?
think, so I think we want to.
And a paired class in many cases too. They can also have. I'm not sure if that's everyone, but academic, well, I'm sorry, algebraic reinforcement and academic
yeah.
reading are the paired classes that students who demonstrate need based on the data will also be enrolled in, right, on both campuses.
So are they skipping physics in order to be able to have the parallel interventions?
Not necessarily.
Where do
They- I
you
mean,
get the
there's-
extra periods in your day?
So I do
They
want to.
do not take their social studies class.
Oh, no social studies? Okay.
So it's, yeah, it's a rotation.
Hi, I'm Jen Madonia. I am a teacher at Hinsdale Central. I'm a co-teacher in English and a case manager. How do we determine?
Oh,
I'm not
sorry,
MC,
sorry.
Thanks. How do we determine which area your student goes into is determined at the IEP meeting? Again, parents, the student, guidance counselors, case managers, they're all part of the team, related services, and we make determinations together on which continuum of services they would best benefit them. Also, their post-secondary plans guide them, so what are their plans for independent living? What employment goals do they have? What type of post-secondary education do they want to go into? That helps guide us also. And one of the most important things is making sure that they are in the least restrictive environment. So just because a student might need a co-taught course in math, they could also be in a prep course. They could also be in an AP course. I mean, it's all determined by the team. It's not just a one-size-fits-all program. It's a variety, and it's whatever the student needs. Other supports we have available for our students are program success and our strategies classes. And we also have the Bases and Haven program available as well within our district.
Here, do you want me to come all the way over there?
Hello, I'm Katie Havertape, and I am one of the social workers in the Haven program. So this was the slide I get to talk about because it has the most relevance, I guess, to me. So one of the things just to note, if you saw on the previous slide, there was a little asterisk. And it's important to appreciate that if your student is a D1 or D2 athlete and they're thinking about going and playing in college, there are specific courses that need to be taken and met in order for them to be eligible. So I've heard some discussion about that freshman year. It's just making sure you're looking at that list, knowing what the colleges are going to expect. And I also learned today when I was looking at it that there's a minimum GPA in those courses as well. So just something to note, the general education classes, the co-taught classes, and then all of the classes within the Haven program will meet that NCAA approval.
Hey everybody, I'm Mary Medina. I'm a case manager and teacher of foundations here at Central. Oh, sorry, is this better? So in summary, aligned and expanded foundations course options. I think Andrea kind of touched on this. They include art, music, and culinary. Those were the classes that are supported by peers. Aligned and expanded self-contained math course sequence with general education, and then alignment of previous applied ES courses sequence. Course titles will be prep. So we talked about this earlier, post-secondary readiness educational pathway.
Okay, go for it, Kim.
What kind of materials are you guys using in the prep classes?
It is a modified version of the general education version of the same class.
So it is the same textbook, even if they're, is that what are we using the same materials? Will they see the same materials in prep as they do in regular education?
So we haven't gotten to that part of our program yet. So we're in our development teams and our writing teams. So what that will look like, where those teams will create those. So right now, like my co-taught physics teacher teaches the self-contained, we call it now applied, but it will be called prep. And so that teacher will modify the curriculum from the general education environment to teach it to the students. That writing team are the ones that are going to identify what does this modification look like? What are the most important concepts that we want the students to make sure to understand?
So if we took like the biology, we just switched curriculum for biology, we switched materials for biology. Will they use the new book or will they use the next book down, which is actually at a lower reading level?
So again, those conversations will take place at when we have those content area meetings. But with it being the modified curriculum, in terms of what we're currently doing, let's say freshman year, you read Boys Life, right? So the students are reading that independently. In a prep ES class, you're still reading that same book, but they read it out loud in class. So different modifications and accommodations like
So
that.
I like that. I don't like when we say, oh, well, we'll just read excerpts of it, because I think that that's a mistake, because you might miss something a kid would connect with. So I do like that, same materials, but in a modified way. Because too often we modify materials and kids never see the same stuff as their peers.
Yeah, it's a straight modification in terms of we're really focusing on those same essential standards. We take those power standards and we ensure that we're addressing those within the class. But I can say, like the example I just gave you, it's just delivered in a different way. And let's say you spend one day on this in a co-taught gen ed setting, you may spend 2 or 3 days in the prep course.
There are a number of redundancies built into all of these plans, right? For instance, it is intentional that all of the gen ed courses went first, right? And now we are looking at the modified versions of many of those courses in this sequence so that we can do exactly what you were suggesting, which is that we are looking at the materials that everyone's going to get and then figuring out how to best modify them through accommodations for the students who are best fitting in that course, right? So that is intentional. Plus, as I believe we said earlier, if you take a look at those, just a smattering, right? There are special education teachers on other courses as well. They are working right now in the development and writing phases of all of these other courses so that they have that experience when they bring it back to their development team and then writing teams. I think a question earlier was about development teams. A development team is the team that sort of like looks at the overarching set of standards that a course will use and how those standards fit in with all of the other courses in the sequence.
Yeah, I've seen some of the materials coming out of those classes, and there's a lot of filling in the blanks that I've seen. And I don't know that that's necessarily what kids like.
So that would be an assessment decision, and we are waist, if not neck deep, in working through what our assessment literacy looks like. That is a district, call it initiative, but not really. It's a priority for this year and more. Yeah, Lori.
Real quick, Andrea, going back to the academic resource class. Hi, Jen. Thanks, Mom. And not to embarrass you, but you're fabulous. And so I was going to.
The audience didn't get that. Jen's fabulous.
Yes, she is. Yeah, please make a note. But what I wanted to say, I remember a conversation that we had where you said, "Oh, Faith is always just doing her homework," or she's, always on her game. She's always doing this or that. But whatever it was that you had and your energy, because she would always invite me to bring a parent to school day. She was my only child that did. So I would come. And so I got a chance to see what Jen did. And I would love if what you did was in those opening 9th grade. Because I think Faith would have made more use of her future academic resource had she had your program. Not to diss the other teachers, but I'm just saying that yours was remarkable to me, even today. So,
Thank you.
In the same vein as we talked earlier about curriculum alignment leads to and is a natural bridge to instructional strategies alignment, that's where those conversations will happen. It's one step at a time, but we're there in a number of places with curriculum alignment, and now the teams are meeting and talking more about how they accomplish what they accomplish rather than what it is that we're going to do.
And she had a hard job.
I think she's still
I was there, I saw it.
You had a question, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have one comment that's just been striking me and then one question. So my comment is that I feel like coming from a feeder district where I've been noticing that they do a lot of piloting different curriculums, and it seems like it's sort of a regular occurrence just to let's throw out a new curriculum. And I'm not sure, and I wonder, I have no experience in education, and I just see that as why, I have a lot of questions why do we do that? And what is the, obviously there's always tweaks and improvements, but the concept of let's get rid of this one and start with this one seems really counterintuitive to me as a person who had a great education, and I don't recall that happening. So I'm just wondering, that just seems a little curious and maybe sketchy to me as a bystander. And then given all of this that you guys are discussing on the high school level, seems like it's adding another huge layer, because it's we're gonna decide what gen ed's doing, and then we have to weave it in for all these people, and there's so many cracks that people could potentially fall through when we're you have to retrain so many pieces of the education system to deliver to these kids, and it's why don't we work on perfecting something? So I know that we're undergoing this huge process right now, and I would just sort of like to stress, it's just like a bystander with younger kids. It's let's do this once pretty well and tweak. You know what I mean? This just seems so much that, So that's my one sort of thing I've noticed. Then my second question is, on the special education side, I heard a comment that we're considered a good district in that regard. How are we measuring success for the kids in our district, and why are we riding on a reputation? Are we measuring ourselves against state standards, or is it this kid came in like this at 9th grade and they are exiting like this at 12th grade and we did that for them and that's our success? Or are we trying to get, what are we trying to do for the kids that makes them successful?
Thank you.
Kudos.
So some different levels at which we assess how we're doing as a special ed department, district-wide. We look at educational environments. So when we see that something in terms of educational environment is how much of the school day is your child within the general education setting. So we could look at that type of data to see that we're ensuring students are in their least restrictive environment, that they're in those classes with their same age peers and getting the supports. So we aren't having students in more restrictive supported classes, so that when they do go out into the world post-secondary, that they have that more independence and confidence and advocacy. Another thing that we spoke of too, that when we looked at other districts and the level of continuum of services and programs that they provide compared to us, we provide a continuum of services from, as you saw, AP with accommodations all the way down to 2 therapeutic day schools within our program. Most districts do not provide therapeutic day schools within their district. They outplace the student to a therapeutic day school in which academics are not stressed. because the rigor of our academics that we provide here in our tradition of excellence, we want to ensure that that's embedded within those therapeutic day schools, that our students aren't shorted that academic opportunity because they may be suffering from social and emotional deficits or delays. So that's another area in which I would measure our level of success for special education through the continuum of services that we provide. We could measure in terms of how many students are graduating from high school with IEPs. We could look at the state scores. So those are all things that we look at in terms of a larger picture that gives us the confidence to say that we're providing these things to our students in the district and how we may compare to others. Do you guys have anything to add?
We should also make sure we're not painting the rosiest picture possible. Right. We have gaps. We clearly do. Our data indicates that we need to work very closely with students who are not at our highest levels in each subject area. Our honors and double accelerated honors students in math and English are dramatically outperforming kids in general education levels and below, right? So we know that when we write a course like Algebra 1 and rewrite a course, which is not completely sort of like throwing everything into a bag and like pulling out, random things. It's taking the standards, looking at the data that we have from past assessments like the PSAT or MAP in some cases, identifying the skills that students don't do as well in, right? And then making sure that we have a firm foundation in those skills as we rewrite that curriculum. One of the biggest differences between middle school and high school curriculum writing is that at middle school it's not often written, especially as you get even lower in K-8 districts. It's something that you often will purchase, like you purchase this program, right? And that program is then laid out for you because you wouldn't expect an elementary teacher to be an expert in every subject area, so they have to have some material, so you purchase programs. At the high school level, it's just not the same beast. So we are looking at those sort of specific skills. Andrea earlier referenced power standards, right? And so there are versions of different standards that everyone is held accountable to. And part of this alignment piece is developing common assessments so that we can gauge better what you're asking. Because right now you can walk into one math class and then go 3 doors down to another one, and they may not just be on different pages, right? But maybe looking at completely different sort of standards, right? This process brings us together so we can have conversations and create assessments to actually measure that growth so that we know that we're not just a destination district because of all the services we offer, but because we are actually growing students from 9 to 12. The value added in District 86 will be apparent, it already is apparent, right? But will be even more apparent through that data. So I appreciate that question, right? And I appreciate your answer, but I just want to be clear, as we're talking about this, in all being very honest, and to the entire Facebook Live group out there, right, that we're working on it. We have work to do, and we're engaging that work, and that's part of this.
That's a very good point, and which leads to my kind of comment. As we're doing this to provide the access and flexibility to a certain group of students, we don't want to sacrifice the rigor of our curriculum at the expense of honor level or AP level students. For example, that's why there's some conversations back and forth on this newly incremental class in the curriculum called the earned honors credit. Mm-hmm. So my question is, you're aware of this problem in transcript for seniors, that these are not really honors level classes in the transcript that's submitted to colleges in their college applications, that create confusion and problems for these seniors that are trying to present the best coursework that they have taken that's reflective of their actual honor level for credit classes they're taking right now. So my question is there any way for us to fix the loophole instead of patching it through footnote in the transcript, etc.? Why do we treat these honors earned credit course different for these core academic courses versus the electives that we're treating them, just code them differently to start with, so they have an honors level class to start with, they're both for honors credit, earned honor credit levels, but while the core academic courses are treated differently from the electives that, currently that create problem for these type of students that's taking the pilot classes right now. Can we offer a real solution instead of Band-Aids?
Okay, so for everyone who's not engaged in this conversation, this is not about special education. This is about our 4 new pilot courses, which are in Intro to Business, in Exploring Visual Arts, and in 2 of our junior, senior English courses. These are not honors courses. They were never designed to be honors courses. We have Advanced Placement Literature and Advanced Placement Language and English, which are the junior and senior honors courses for those that want the strict, this is our advanced acceleration, class program. Students that have selected to be in these classes, a majority of them may not attempt any of the more rigorous assignment attempts outside of the general curriculum that they have, right? But if they do, they will receive, and if they meet the criteria, they will receive honors credit at the end of the class. I completely understand your concern, which is if a person is sending a transcript, early action or early decision, and wants to show on November 1st what it is that their student is attempting that is more rigorous, right? How can we partner with you in this pilot to make that a reality, right? So what we did today, right, based on your conversation, I know that you're not thrilled with the solution, but just so that everyone understands, right, is that we've added a component to the transcript that indicates what the 4 courses are that are for earned honors credit, right, which falls less than an inch underneath the actual courses on the transcript where students are listed, right, and, right, we will advise students as they fill out their, let's say, common application, right, that they list when they say, because you type in your own courses, right, it's not pulled from a transcript, you list it, to actually write earned honors credit, right? Because you can, because that's what you will have, right? If you complete it, right? So that's.
It has to match 100%
And it will.
at the time you put your application in. You can't add anything. It has to match 100%.
Yeah, that creates a problem. First of all, some schools are not on Common App. For example, MIT has their own application
Sure.
app. If they're not on Common App, there's no such thing that student can just type in. Second of all, I just feel that why treat for earned credit for electives different from full core electives?
I apologize, I don't know which one you're talking about.
And orchestra, for earned honors credit, these, as the teacher, the first week of these classes, the teacher will ask the students to fill out the form if they want to do it in earned honor credit. And immediately these students, in their transcript, it will be entered in as honors level class. And since we're just doing the same earned honor credit in a similar format, just for instead of elective, you're doing it for English for core academic courses. Why do we treat them differently?
Because it's actually a very different system. It's not the same thing, right? And it was never designed to be the same thing. It was designed to accelerate the general education student who isn't typically one who would stretch for more rigorous coursework. It gives them that outlet to potentially do so.
I think that.
Go ahead. You've had your hand up for a little while. Yeah.
I'm sorry, this may be a better question for an offline conversation. I didn't realize from the description that it was just going to be a special ed discussion tonight.
It was not supposed to be, but we're making our way.
Okay, that's fine, I get it. And I appreciate you all for staying here and for having these community conversations. My questions were related to the earned honors credit. And I was hoping to learn a little bit more about the impetus for offering, and I do understand that desire to help push those middle group students to encourage them to try a little bit more. I know that's been a problem for the district for as long as I've been here, 10 years. My question was really related to how do you justify, explain to the traditional honor student that this other student is going to get full credit, that GPA bump, that bonus, when this traditional honor student is doing that additional rigor every single day, every single night, at the detriment to their social life, family life, sleep, other grades, everything else?
Well, as I said earlier, we are in maybe day 10 of our actual pilot here, right? And we are looking at, right, all of these types of comments. That did come up earlier. One of the answers is that it is clearly, for all intents and purposes, labeled as an advanced placement course in the areas of, say, English, right? These courses, as we think about them, were really not supposed to be ones, and we don't want them to be ones that cannibalize, right, the other honors courses. They're supposed to be in areas where we don't necessarily have an honors option available already, right? But in the area of English, we had heard from a number of students, a lot of student conversation happened that, you know what, like, for instance, I passed my AP literature exam, I got a 4, I got a 5, and I know for a fact, right, that no college is going to take 2 5s in English.
Right.
So, how do I still challenge myself for the next year, but not necessarily have the, I think you called it a social life detriment. Now I'm putting words in your mouth, I apologize.
The GPA detriment, there's a sleep detriment, there's a social life detriment.
So those are some of the factors. I mean, again, we are assessing on a regular basis. We actually have a community conversation specifically devoted to that at the beginning of semester 2 after we have done 1 full semester of this pilot. And we'll begin to talk more about what we found, what the data is showing us, how many students are attempting it, what the outcomes were, and you gave the word, so I'm going to use your word even though I don't love it, but the loopholes or the things that we had not yet fully articulated. Right? That will happen. That happens with pilots. That's why we do pilots.
Well,
Yes.
other districts call those pathways to honors, and it's not the full GPA bump, it's a partial. And I think that would be a lot easier for families that have kids who have lost their lives because they're all AP honors. It would be easier to swallow that one. I mean, because who knows? They can't bring the Kleenex box, but we still don't know what those earned honors are. We don't know if they have a research paper. We don't know if they have to get 80% on additional tests. We don't know, because you've never laid out the structure of what earned honors is, what the expectations are. But I think it's a great thing to call it a pathway to honors. I think that actually expresses what your intent is with it.
Okay. I'm guessing you may be here at the community conversation for that, but I'll take those notes anyway.
I'll be here for
Yeah,
honors.
yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, yeah.
I was just gonna, in a kind of agreement with what I'm hearing over here, it is a pilot, and it's very confusing as a parent, when you have a rising junior who is not necessarily in honors classes, or, should we try this, should we not? And then once they're in, if they are taking the class, a class like English tends to be more subjective than obviously a class like science or math. And so if the kids are all in the same class, and you have some that are taking it for honors, some that are not, I feel like it can be a wishy-washy thing as to how the kids are, what are they having to do to earn honors credit? And if you choose at the beginning of the year that you're not going to go with the earned honors credit, and then it turns out like it really wasn't that hard to earn the honors credit. I just feel like it's a pilot, and I think that it's going to be extremely important to come back and really
A couple things we should clarify. No one's declaring, right? You can say, I'd like to do this. We're not having people sign on the dotted line. There are assignments along the way. There are extra opportunities along the way that they can choose to do, right? For instance, in English, if they're doing a book study and the students are given 5 novels, 3 or 4 of them will be grade level or slightly above grade level novels, and the 5th one will be very above grade level. And those students that choose to do the assignment with that novel might be the ones that earn honors credit for that portion. I would encourage all of you, quick plug, Thursday night, 7 o'clock. Does 7 o'clock start? 6 o'clock start? Curriculum night? Anyway, the teachers of these classes will be talking about what those assignments are. They'll be laying them out. They've already discussed them. Part of the last 6 months for them has been figuring out exactly what they're going to do in those classes with this pilot. So they have a really strong idea. So I would ask you to contact the teacher of the class.
So Breda, back to special ed, but also I think it may apply in general. A while back, I had talked with Jess Hurd and Patrice Payne about trajectory planning software for special ed. And I don't know, I haven't talked to them about it, maybe it was 6 months ago, I don't even know. But I don't know if there is anything like that out there specifically for any student, but particularly special ed. And when I think back to how the math piece, not getting the ability to get Algebra 2 trig in time, so I couldn't help but think that if we had curriculum set up where you plug it in with a student and you can have more than one pathway, where, oh, well, if you take this pathway, you're not going to be able to get to this by senior year, et cetera. Because I think a lot of the confusion comes in, thank you, a lot of the confusion comes in because parents don't know what they don't know until they get to that point where they start to concern themselves more with it. And then I think too, such as this earned honors class, or perhaps in the future pathways, maybe that's spelled out a little bit better in one of those trajectory pathways. Because I think the idea is well intended, but then there's always these loopholes, things that we didn't anticipate. But when it comes back to special ed, as you know, the kids work so hard to achieve every single tiny goal. And I thought, if there is, to the other woman's point, if there is a way to measure that for them personally, to see that trajectory that builds the confidence that you were talking about, Andrea. And to me, building the confidence is the hardest thing to teach. Anyway, I don't know if there is software or something like that, but I would be a fan of, exploring that.
We'll write that down. I would encourage you to stay tuned to what we want to talk about over the next few months as we transition away from Naviance and to School Links, because School Links is a software that does what you're talking about right now.
Okay.
Right, and it does it. It personalizes it.
No more football fields.
Well, I mean, every year you meet with your counselor and you sort of figure out what your trajectory is now.
So their own personal plot.
It is, and based on sort of a career inventory and some of the things that are pretty traditional in high school, but it's a pretty nuanced software program that, again, we are sort of slowly implementing over the next year so that our seniors can stay with what they currently have.
When are we getting rid of Naviance?
Not for current seniors. They're gonna.
How about current juniors?
Current juniors are going to learn School Links and put all their application stuff in for senior year in School Links. It'll start.
Screenshots today of all the schools are interested.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
So,
Everything transfers.
Okay.
They're completely synced, and we have Naviance through the end of the summer, next summer.
Okay.
Right? No, we've overlapped it. There will be
in
nothing.
the middle of the school.
No, absolutely nothing lost. No, the School Links is a very intuitive program that will pull everything from Naviance into it before we don't need it anymore. Right? So anything anyone's ever done goes into the sort of the tracking.
Scattergrams
Yes.
and all that. Okay.
Yeah. Scattergrams are changing too because they're all being re-scattered without SAT scores and ACT scores because nationally there is a movement away from or towards score optional.
Will
right?
there be like, you can see either over? Or
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you go onto any university's website right now, that besides MIT, right, you will find that they are listing rigor of coursework, strong coursework, grades as being primary drivers of applications. And if you'd like to send scores and you think they're going to benefit you, please do.
But when you talk to the admissions people or the college coaches, they tell you, we're saying that, but that's not true.
It's right, absolutely
Right.
true.
have
If you
that
bomb the
absolutely
SAT, you will not get in.
And we have to always be clear that everyone is still aligning scholarships and other pieces to the SAT. So we are in no way as a district saying the SAT is not important.
Yeah.
We're just saying that there is a narrative that we have to be thinking about that has test optional pieces included, because that is a reality of our current application system.
So they changed the registration process between my two kids, and you did do a 4-year plan when you came for your initial counseling meeting, when my 2016 grad was in her first meeting, and we didn't like the trajectory that they had created, and so we created scenarios to jump out of it, and I think that that would be something that would be incredibly helpful for kids in special ed, is, you know, what do you need to do to be able to drop your resource period, which I thought was hilarious that they let my son do it without even saying anything, but, you know, what are the hoops you have to jump through in order to, you know, move up. So like kids are looking at something, because I know, Laura, your daughter wanted to move out of something, and they just told her, if you can do this, but
No.
like building that in.
I worked with the case manager on this because we came up with something together. Because at that stage, my daughter couldn't really articulate why she wanted to leave the class. And she kept saying that she didn't need it. Well, what she meant to say, what she eventually said, is, I can do the work. So the case manager said, prove it. And she did. So they came up with a plan for her to prove it. She did. And then she was allowed to have her first elective midway through sophomore year.
And I think those are really important things, setting expectations and, you know, a pathway out.
That would have been a great plot piece.
Okay. We have a lot of notes.
If I could just say one.
Yes, sure.
Because the woman here talked about how do you measure success, and you mentioned a number of things, and you mentioned the PSAT. It was very disconcerting to hear the district is not requiring the PSAT anymore.
That's not true. Every student will take the PSAT in the spring, and the juniors will take it in the fall.
When are they taking the 8, 9, and 9, 10?
April 15th and 16th.
It's not on the calendar.
It is.
So every student will take it?
Yes.
As a 9th grader and a 10th grader
Yes.
and an 11th grader?
It's a state requirement.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
So, and they're taking the
That's
PSAT
wonderful.
and MSQ.
All juniors will take the PSAT and MSQT on October 12th,
And then they'll take the SAT.
on April 15th.
So, but are they testing days now?
They always have been. The April days have been testing days. We made the junior day a non-testing day because we are missing the juniors are testing on that day.
Right.
All other students are not staying home. They're still coming to school and doing school.
They're testing in the field house, in
Yes.
other words.
Okay, so the classes will still
Like
run.
they used
Yes.
to.
And the 9th graders will take the PSAT,
In April.
the 9th graders?
Yes.
And then the 10th graders will take it,
Yes.
whatever their date is?
April, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Well, I am delighted to hear that.
Yeah, I was like trying to figure out how you were gonna measure success since you're not measuring until junior year. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
We will
Okay.
continue with our ability to do spring to spring. 2 years ago, we made the attempt, and then COVID is really throwing a wrench in doing all 3 tests fall and spring. But that eats into instructional time by quite a bit. Takes out another 2 days.
So I have a question. The PTAC data retreat. Last year in grade level math, 71% failed to meet state standards, and in English, 61% failed to meet state standards. What, as a district, I mean, are we doing? Because if you have that many who are below grade level, they should be in your classes because we don't have somewhere else for them to go. So are we going to support those kids? What are we doing? Because that's a huge number of kids.
Yeah, it's
In one building,
It's almost
it's-
400 in the district,
It's insane.
right? Yeah, I know that was the area that we are most concerned about, for sure. So one piece, if you just talk about math, right, is in making sure that, as I suggested earlier, as we look at the curriculum, we are making sure that we are addressing what the data tells us are gaps in that curriculum, right? What is it that the kids are not doing well? There's an absolutely beautiful concordance chart for everything in the SAT, right, and the PSATs, and we know exactly where the students are not doing well. That information gets into the hands of the course teams as they both write the curriculum, right, and as they provide sort of instructional changes in curriculum development. Okay, that is happening for the first time in a little while, right, in our Algebra 1 curriculum writing area, which we just started the new
That seems
course
like a
this time.
lag though to me. I mean, seriously, we've got kids I mean, the data showed between sophomore and junior year, zero growth in the bottom 25%
That's also not
of the
accurate, because
kids.
that data set looked at junior to junior, fall to spring, right? That was that data set, right? And that
Okay.
data set showed that the median number was 0. There were actually about 25% that met growth, right? But that is even misleading. And I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture, I just want to be accurate, right?
Well, it was
That-
bad, it was
that-
really bad, and then it was bad. But,
Yes,
I
yes,
mean,
and not different than years past, right? Right,
Really?
if we were looking at that data for years past, we'd be seeing similar things. This district does a tremendous job with accelerating students. We are right now figuring out how we can address the needs of those students that you're talking about, because that is our greatest area of need. We're on the same page, right? So it's through curriculum alignment, which is the big word for just, we're finding out where they're not doing well, and we're redoing things so that we can address those needs, right? We are also figuring out how to do that with the geometry group this year. That's the team that's now meeting, right? Can't do it all at once. As this parent has said before, we're not throwing spaghetti at a wall, we're being very targeted. And I think that that's the only way to do it.
Right, but you're missing any kid who's in the building who's above that.
Now, we are also using that data for the first time, and specifically on early release Wednesdays, right, to create MTSS groups, right, where every kid who falls into that range now has a case manager, right? And we're not talking about special ed, we are talking about general ed students who fall in those bands. We now know who they are. They are all, after this very first set of math assessments, going to get a case manager based on 3 criteria. Are they in school? How are they doing in school? And what do their historical test scores say? The kids who we find in that block, it's going to be about 115, 120 total kids at the lowest end, the ones with the most needs, are going to get their own case manager that will meet with them on a regular basis.
How many, what's the breakout building to building?
I think it's about 90 at South and about 70 at Central.
But what's the case manager going to actually do?
So the case manager is going to use the MTSS program, and we have a list of options. These are our tiers, and these are our supports. Which ones are you going to use? What are your goals? How are we going to track them, right? And when they achieve them, then we exit them and pull in another group of kids. And if they don't, we stick with them. And all of those case managers, which are going to be counselors and other members of the student services team, are looking directly, and everyone knows. Everyone knows what all of the supports are, and everyone knows what the goals are for that student who are involved with the student. A wraparound set of supports.
So how many students are there? Because how many case managers do you have?
Yeah, we have a very large student services group. Every counselor, every social worker, every student support person, right? And these are what they will be doing while teachers are working in course teams on Wednesdays, in addition to other things. But this is one of the duties that they did otherwise. You guys know about guest teams. This is a new version of the guest team, right, that is much more targeted using the data from the kids. We are excited about seeing how it works.
Okay. Have you thought about putting a sandwiched resource in for kids instead of having them just, they're losing 2 electives in order to have
They are often in
academic?
resources as well. Kids, we just don't have enough space in the school day, which will be part of next October's conversation about changing the instructional bell schedule.
Thank you.
And with that, I feel like we've said a lot, probably not enough, maybe too much, right? But, we've got a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah. We really appreciate you guys being here.
We really
Yeah.
appreciate you engage the community.
What is the assessment test for special ed kids? I remember we talked about it before. It's not the TSAT, it's not they take a different. Oh, it's a test.
So
Some
1% of all students in the
Some do
district
take
take
that.
the DL.
That's what it was called.
It's one total of 1%.
Oh, no, I just remember there was.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's vastly inappropriate for the vast majority of our kids.
But I didn't.
But it's only 1% by statute that can take it.
Bye. Bye, thank you.
Thank
you, guys. Your Portillo's class, I stared at it the whole time, now I have to look.
Yeah, you're gonna go.
Thanks a lot.